Alright, welcome back. Finally ready to tackle the fuselage on this ASH30 build. And we're going to start with the rudder, getting the rudder servo installed. And I've been provided this Servo HV3512. It's a low profile standard servo. And she's got quite a bit of torque, so it should all be good. And here's what the servo looks like right here. And it goes in here. So here's the rudder. And this is the pre-cut opening here. And I want to get the servo mounted like that, just so I can have the linkage all working on the same plane instead of having, see if I put the servo like this, then the arm would be going like this, and then our control horn on the rudder would be this way, and it would kind of, you know, not really work out so well. So I want to mount it like this, but the problem is that I want to be able to get the servo out if you have to service it or adjust it or do whatever, replace it. So I had a long think about this and started tinkering with some wood, and this is kind of what I came up with here. So this box drops in here and everything will get epoxied in, and theoretically I'll be able to pull the plate that actually holds the servo straight out, and we'll be able to bolt it down with some blind nuts on the back. So bolt here, bolt there. Made some rails that the servo mount jigs into. So let me kind of show you what that looks like. We'll have two bolts holding it down, and if we take those bolts out, we should be able to pull this plate out and get the servo out like this. Everything will get epoxied together, so it'll be much more secure. Right now it's just kind of tacked all together with super glue. But yeah, that's what I'm working on, and so far it's looking pretty good. I'm going to do a little bit more work on this. I need to cut a relief for the linkage that's going to pass through, and I might put some lightning holes in it, and then we can get it epoxied in, and then we'll move on to putting a horn in here and running a linkage rod to the servo. So the progress on the rudder servo, everything has been epoxied in place, so it's really secure. If I slide the servo out, you can see that I did whittle the parts down a little bit to remove as much weight as possible. You can see those kind of arcs in there, and it's epoxied on this surface and this surface, so I've tied those surfaces together. And then this piece, this cross member, has a piece beneath it. You can see it jigging into place there, and that's epoxied to the cross member and to the other side of the fuselage there. Likewise, this side also all epoxied in, and I've reinforced the servo joints with epoxy, and the servo's basically screwed in, but it's not 100% tight. But it works quite well, so it just slides into place, and it kind of locks in, and then I'll run two screws into those blind nuts there. Okay, so then after that, I started working on the rudder horn, which I have in place here. You can see this horn right here. I have two holes drilled in it, so possibly you could adjust the length. There's going to be a ball link there, and then a ball link onto the servo with some kind of solid rod between. I'm not sure if I'm going to use a carbon rod or just a piece of fully threaded rod, but we'll get to that. So anyway, this is the horn. It's quite large. It's made out of G10 fiberglass, and it's like 2.5 millimeters thick. 3 millimeter holes for the ball links there. So that'll get epoxied in, and that'll also tie both sides of the rudder skin together and this post, so it'll be quite strong. But when I was messing with all that, I noticed that the rudder doesn't hardly get any travel in the right direction. So that's max travel right there, and maybe that's 10 degrees. And then obviously this way you can get as much as you want. But so the problem is that the epoxy wiper hits the post all the way along. So this post is bonded in 5 millimeters too far aft, and there's really no way to fix it except for grinding off the entire wiper. And even doing that, I'm not quite sure we'll get enough. We'll definitely get a lot more, but then that leaves us without a wiper. I can't remake a wiper because there's no room in there with that post. So it's a challenge. Right now I'm thinking maybe using tape, a tape wiper. But yeah, just a poor design. I don't even know why this rudder is skin hinged like this. Every scale plane I've seen, every scale plane that I've seen, the rudder has been a separate piece with like a pin hinge. So I'm not liking this one bit. Yeah, so if I can eliminate the wiper today and get the rudder horn bonded in, probably pretty happy with that, and then we'll have to deal with the tape wiper later. Okay, so I have sanded and ground off the entire wiper all the way up and down the rudder here. And this is the travel that we're left with. So I think we've probably doubled what we had, but double of 10 degrees is only 20 degrees. So that's it, folks. That's all we're going to get. To get any more, I'd have to actually cut back the rudder itself, and I don't really want to do that. So yeah, that's all we got. We'll have to run a tape wiper, but in the meantime, I have to make a cutout here for the push rod and clearance for the horn, because this tail post is so close to the end of the vertical that the horn hits that too. So we're going to work on cutting that out, and then we will glue the horn in. We'll scuff this up really good, and then all that's left mechanically is to make the linkage right there. So the horn's epoxied in, plenty of epoxy all around, and I shoved a bunch in the slot on the skins, so I'm pretty confident that it's tied together on both sides of the rudder, and it fits in that hole we cut earlier. Did I show you that? There's the hole right there, the clearance for the push rod and the rudder horn, and that goes in there like that. So it's all good as it's going to be. So that needs a day to dry, and then we'll figure out some kind of linkage. Alright, well, geez, I'm going to go ahead and trim 2 millimeters off the rudder here in an attempt to get just a bit more travel. It's really a pain in the butt. I'm really hating this model, honestly. So yeah, don't buy this model. Quality sucks. But I'll trim that, and then that's going to be it. I'm not going to do anything else to that, and then we can make the push rod there. Alright, that's trimmed up. And I have managed to achieve maybe another 2 degrees of rudder throw, and I'm fed up with this, so whatever. And now we'll make this thing. So here's the setup for our rudder linkage. We have 2 heavy-duty ball links, 3mm threads, and I've already prepped the rudder horn, the servo horn or arm, and I have a nut on that ball link, and that's got high strength thread lock on there, and I'm using the shortest position possible because we don't get any rudder movement. And then we have a piece of 3mm threaded rod that'll go between the ball links, and this is a carbon tube with a 3mm hole, and I'm going to slide that in between, and that's just going to stiffen this linkage up tremendously. And what I'm also going to do, it's going to make this non-adjustable, but I don't think that really matters, but I'm going to put a little bit of epoxy across the whole linkage there, so we'll have some epoxy getting into the ball links, and then this will be epoxied down onto the rod, and we'll make a really rigid linkage right there. So here's the finished linkage for our rudder. Epoxy has been applied all throughout the rod, the 3mm threaded rod. There's a carbon sleeve. It's super rigid, and we're going to go ahead and install it. So we'll use a nut here on the horn and the rudder, and I will put some high strength thread lock on that, just like I did on this nut there, and I ground the stud down a little bit so it wouldn't interfere with the servo. So we'll go ahead and get that installed. So linkage is installed. I have the ball link installed in the horn with a nut, high strength thread lock, and I was able to tighten the servo arm screw just by rotating this arm downward and then pulling this up, and I could get a screwdriver in there, so that was no issue. I was kind of worried about that, but it worked out really well. So the last thing to do is just run a couple of screws straight down with some washers to hold that in. But I'll show you just the actuation here. And I'm actually happy with the geometry because we're using the entire servo movement and maxing out the rudder travel. I mean, we don't get much rudder travel, but that part of it's working out okay. You can see the nut there on the horn. So yeah, the servo's doing its job well. We're using all of its resolution and torque, so that's great. I'm just going to run some screws down on here, and that'll basically button it up. I got to make one long extension for the wire, but I might do that later. So I'll run screws into this, and then I'm going to trim this cover to size because it's way oversized, and then I'll just tape it on temporarily. Okay, so I have screws holding the servo bracket, or whatever you want to call it, down, and it's super rigid. I'm really happy with that. So that's all buttoned up, and I've trimmed out the cover. Fits nicely right there. So mechanically the rudder is done. We'll do the extension off camera. You don't need to see me make an extension. Yeah, so that's all great. Next thing I'm probably going to tackle is getting the other side of the multiplex connector in here for the elevator. So we're going to have to glue a connector in here. But we'll save that for another video. So thanks a lot for watching.